Imagine for a second you are the developer Capcom. Your series Resident Evil has been a hit since 1996 and has captured the hearts and breaths of fans for years, being the first game to create the concept of survival horror video games. As time has gone on, you've even created a video game that completely changed action games forever and is known as one of the best video games of all time on sites like IGN and Metacritic. That title being Resident Evil 4. But as excellent as that is, there's a problem. The release of Resident Evil 5 had fans questioning the direction of the series, and Resident Evil 6 was an action romp that didn't help. There was a dude who turned into a meat T-Rex. The symbolic shark had been jumped. But that title was considered a flop from the projected sales it was supposed to make. Now, my question to you, hypothetical Capcom, is what do? How will you breathe new life into this series, a series that feels like a shambling corpse of what it was? I actually have an answer, but I did ask you and I don't want to invalidate your ideas, so feel free to share them in the comments below. But if you're executive producer Jun Takeuchi, the plan is simple: horror. Specifically in the vein of the first Evil Dead, using the first-person perspective, which is also photorealistic, allowing for a sense of realism for the player. A single-player experience with no co-op, and all references to past titles kept to a minimum. And with these guidelines, the team began working on a game, traveling to abandoned houses in Osaka and visiting the swamps of Louisiana to better understand the fear they were trying to elicit. After years of development, in 2017, the game was finally released and welcomed with fanfare from critics and fans alike. In the eyes of horror junkies, much like Frankenstein's monster, the series was imbued with new life. Resident Evil was back, baby. Fast forward 2 years later, and I'm just finishing second shift at a Midwestern Walmart. It's about 11 p.m. and a buddy and I are making our way out of the superstore. As we pass the entertainment section, I notice on sale a copy of Resident Evil 7 for PlayStation 4. I'd heard great things about it, so I used the money from my paycheck and purchased the game just before leaving. When I got home, as I'm getting ready for bed, I begin downloading the game so I can play it tomorrow. And shockingly, the installation process was done by the time I brushed my teeth. Because it was already done and I didn't have to work tomorrow, I rationalized I could play just a little bit of it before heading to bed. So I opened the application on my PlayStation as the TV glow begins illuminating the living room. I played for a little bit before checking the time, and holy shit, it was already morning! That's when I knew I had been infected. I was now a fan and craved this type of game. Welcome to this horror-themed macho recommendation. Tonight, it will be my pleasure to introduce you to Resident Evil 7, my gateway to survival horror. In 2017, our protagonist Ethan Winters travels to Dulvey, Louisiana. He's recently gotten an email from his wife saying to come get her. With a desire to see his wife and dying to know why she's been gone for 3 years, he drops everything. Ethan arrives at the place, a derelict and seemingly abandoned mansion, but as we quickly discover with the animal carcasses strewn about and a male figure walking around, that latter point isn't the case. While traveling the house, he comes across a videotape showing a group of dudes filming for a web series, but the video abruptly ends when the producer, Andre, is impaled on a hook. This place is dangerous and Ethan needs to move quickly. So as Ethan travels under the foundations of the house, he eventually comes across Mia, and as she awakes and sees him for the first time in 3 years, her reaction isn't one of joy, but of terror, as she desperately looks for a way to escape and begins screaming when an exit she saw is no longer there. As we look around, Mia lets out a shriek as we double back, only to find a hole in the wall and Mia is gone. But when we meet back up with her, there's something off about her. There are a few confrontations with this possessed Mia, one in combat and resulting in Mia toppling to the floor. As we look towards the window, our closest option for escape, we are ambushed by a man named Jack Baker, saying that iconic phrase.
Welcome to the family, son.
And with that, our fate is sealed. If Ethan stays here too long, he will end up like every poor soul who stumbled upon this place. That being a corpse scattered around the mansion, or going through something way worse. It's up to you to find a way out, or Ethan will stay with the Bakers indefinitely. I mentioned earlier that this game is my first taste of survival horror, but what exactly does that mean? It's difficult to fully articulate, so I'm going to start with what a survival horror game isn't. A traditional action video game structure will follow a steady escalation of the player getting stronger while doing the same for enemies. The game is created in a way to make it fun, feeling a sense of accomplishment while slowly increasing the difficulty to keep it engaging, giving the player various options to tackle encounters to create a fun experience. And I'm sure you knew this was coming, survival horror is not like this at all. Survival horror is still considered in the action game genre, but it acts like a different beast. The point of this game isn't to style on your enemies, it isn't for the player to get more powerful, it's simply to survive. Rather than a steady progression like in a traditional action game, survival horror is one where the player feels small and helpless to much greater forces. And strength comes not in pure damage numbers, but in understanding how the game works and the limitations it presents to you. Then once you reach a certain point, grasping your circumstances and understanding how the game works, you finally confront that overwhelming force, resulting in a satisfying payoff. And that first part with its limitations is what I consider the strongest part of this type of game. I've played so many games where my character can steamroll over anything in my way, but a game that's willing to humble me, putting an opponent that is way out of my league in my path and trusts me to figure it out sounds like a total blast. This can be done in multiple ways, such as giving you a limited amount of ammo and healing supplies, nowhere near enough to gun down every enemy you encounter, carefully considering when to use them or how you'll recover after panicking and using them in a pinch. Or a control scheme that makes moving around more difficult. A single enemy can be a terrifying threat as they can kill your character if grabbed. But rather than moving by pointing in that direction, you might have to turn your character in the direction you want to go, then move forward. That point seems silly to mention, but if you're in a tense situation where that last save point was a while ago and at low health, it becomes a terrifying experience, using the mechanics to instill fear into the player. This is masterfully done in the original Resident Evil and its remake with tank controls. The point of survival horror isn't to feel like an overpowered character who can go toe-to-toe with anything you come across, but instead feel like the underdog, using everything at your disposal to fight things beyond your capabilities. You don't win encounters in this type of game, you survive them. And Resident Evil 7 captures this perfectly. Most of the game's objectives are Ethan finding keys to escape further away from the Bakers, all the while encountering these mold creatures and the infected family members, each with their own approaches to ultimately killing the poor guy. Such as Jack, the father of the house, with a straightforward approach of finding Ethan and brutally murdering him, hunting you in the house as you attempt to explore. Or Marguerite, the mother of the house, choosing to create insect hives to attack you rather than directly confronting you, reflecting her skittish and paranoid complexion. With Bakers or the mold creatures, combat is always an option, but it requires tact. If you waste all your ammo on an encounter with Jack in the main house, you're at a disadvantage when making your way to the basement, and you won't have anything to defend yourself if you get swarmed. Rather than finish the job with an enemy, it might be a good idea to knock them down, stun them with a headshot, or run past them, risking that they will come back and hunt you down, but conserving as much ammo as possible for the future. It creates gameplay tension of managing your supplies while guaranteeing you can last long enough to use them, which makes the gameplay exhilarating. There's also a light crafting system where you can combine items to make different ammo or healing, but it's always a trade-off because all items require chem fluid to make, so it might make you weigh what you'll use it for. Do you want more ammo to survive encounters, or a first aid bottle to take more hits? Or use it to craft an item allowing for an easier time scavenging? This is a decision that is always presented to the player. Of course, you could explore to find supplies, which could be a downtime activity from a brutal encounter, or hiding an enemy to catch you off guard. The thing that makes survival horror so impactful is its meticulous pacing, weaving between tense encounters, quiet puzzle solving, reading files, and possibly the most relaxing parts of the game, when you find a save room. The moments when you're in one of these rooms are so lovely. Enemies can't get in, and it's guaranteed place to catch your breath, save your progress, and put or take items out of the storage box. Take as long as you need before getting back out there. Resident Evil 7's pacing is so good for most of the game, taking you from adrenaline-inducing highs to relief to tense moments of exploring in an experience that will keep you invested until the credits roll. But what makes the horror and terror of Resident Evil 7 really sink in are two additions, that being the character you play as and the perspective you see it through. For a series that's lasted over 25 years, there's going to be fan favorite characters. Even as someone who has never played a Resident Evil game for the longest time, even I know about these characters, thanks to the internet and the people who love sharing them. Jill, the master of unlocking Valentine, and Chris, Boulder Puncher Redfield, the playable protagonists in the first Resident Evil, are burned into my psyche. Not to mention Leon S. Kennedy, who in Resident Evil 2 suffers the worst first day on the job ever, then in Resident Evil 4 is called to rescue the president's daughter with cheesy but also endearing one-liners. No thanks, bro, or where's everyone going? Bingo? There are plenty of charming and fun characters that people love. With that love comes a sense of familiarity. In the original Resident Evil, this was the first time you played these characters. You don't know anything about them. All you knew was that they were stuck here and trying to get out. But as the series continued, these reoccurring characters would become icons in their series, presenting a feeling of safety. The more a character shows up, especially in horror-related media, the seemingly invincible they are. Because each time they survived, they were learning. They were getting wiser and more experienced, having the threshold of what they could handle getting higher, until the situations they were placed in didn't feel like survival horror anymore. It felt like blockbuster action. And I'm betting that's what made Resident Evil 6 very divisive for fans. With the amount of experience these characters had in this universe, it would be the next logical step for the developers to make it horror action, where the scale was larger, the encounters more numerous, and one guy could do kung fu. But as seen with the sales, fans didn't want action with a coat of horror paint. They wanted survival horror. And that's why it's so genius to have Ethan Winters as the protagonist for RE7. Ethan Winters works so well as a character because he's just a regular person. From what we know, he has no military training and no survivor experience. He doesn't quip or laugh in the face of danger, but is terrified of it. It replicates the feeling of the first Resident Evil, where Chris and Jill, besides being members of the police department STARS, little else was known about them. But where RE7 adds to this is using the first-person perspective to experience the game. Having the characters share their viewpoint with Ethan creates a connection between you. There is no character model to watch encounter these foes, no safety net where players can distance themselves from this character. You are in their shoes and will be subjected to everything that happens to them, for better and for worse. And the developers really nailed using that perspective, a genius mechanic that really hammers home Ethan's inexperience, and the sheer horror of this situation is how you block. If you're going to be hit and can't get out of the way, you bring Ethan's hands above his face and can reduce the damage. But it also highlights just how terrified he is. In an adrenaline state, his best option is to put his hands in hopes of not immediately dying. And this is featured in one of the most impactful moments in the game's opening and highlights just how in over his head Ethan is. Just a heads up, this is going to get pretty graphic, so if you are not into that sort of thing, you might want to close your eyes or skip ahead. Your call. Near the end of the opening, Ethan has encountered a possessed Mia and embedded an axe in her shoulder. And just as you place a fuse to open the attic section of the house, you make your way to the stairs, and this moment happens, showing you what type of experience this will be.
Ethan, it's okay. It's okay, it's me. I know you didn't mean to hurt me.
You shouldn't have done that! It fucking hurts! Now, let's see what you feel. Inside jaw must contain outbreak. Gonna win, I promise. Must burn it all down.
Years later, this is still a hard scene to watch for me. It's the sheer unpredictability of it. It starts so suddenly, and then is slowly drawn out in the worst ways, as Mia finds and approaches you with the chainsaw. I was convinced that Ethan would get out just in time and prevent the showcase of body horror, but that wasn't the case. And it really set the tone for what this game will be. You are not playing as a military-trained action hero or government agent. You are playing as a regular person, and you can get hurt badly. Your arm gets stapled together in a cutscene by Zoe, and for the rest of the game, whenever you pull up your items menu or look at your character's health, you'll be reminded by those staples just how badly it can end if you're not careful. Before I go further in this video, I want to give a heads up about some stuff before you decide to try it. This game features a lot of body horror and generous amounts of blood and gore. If that's something that makes you uncomfortable more than just morbid curiosity, then you might not dig Resident Evil 7. It's a game created to be a horror experience. If that's not your thing, that's totally cool. But I have an alternative. For the rest of the video, I want to do a story recap while expanding on certain aspects, similar to what I did in my Near Replicant video. So if you don't feel like playing the game but want to know what happens as a horror story, then your pal Macho's got you covered. But if you do want to play it and don't want the game to be more spoiled than what I've already covered, then feel free to peace out now, and I'll see you in another video. Alright pal, if you're sticking around, use the bathroom, turn off the lights, and grab yourself a beverage of choice. Maybe break out some candy corn if you've got them. I'm grabbing those awesome candy pumpkins on my end. And enjoy as someone who isn't your dad tells you a story.
Where we last left off, Ethan is getting stomped by Jack, and when he comes to, we are introduced to the family and their dynamic. There's Jack, the previously mentioned father of the house. He's the head honcho, if you will. He calls the shots and is the strongest, using physical might to get what he wants. Marguerite is the mother and has bouts of hysteria and intense emotion, constantly scratching and darting her eyes around the table. Lucas, their son, is an interesting case. He runs his mouth and antagonizes Ethan, but cannot physically back up what he does. This is apparent when, after throwing a plate at Ethan, Jack grabs his son's hand and saws it off, with Lucas saying, "Not again," showing that his mouth and actions have gotten him into trouble on multiple occasions. The last family member here is Grandma. She just blends into the background and doesn't seem antagonistic to Ethan. The family departs from the table, with the possibility of a cop knocking on the door. As the family departs, we are given control, and the game can properly begin. With that stated, I now feel it appropriate, after lulling you into a false sense of security with how this video is laid out, to add a jump scare of a new topic, or a structure startle. It's a working title. This will focus on the game's primary influence shared in the GDC talk of the game, which will be linked in the description below under sources. And that is, of course, the original Evil Dead. The original Evil Dead is focused on a group of young adults who travel into a cabin in the woods on a couple's vacation, but through harmless curiosity, accidentally play a recording reading from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, or the Book of the Dead, awaking demons from their slumber, leading to our characters attempting to survive until sunrise. The movie came out in 1981 and was directed by Sam Raimi, who would eventually direct the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. The main star was Bruce Campbell, playing the character Ash Williams, who would become a horror icon with this series. But the most important stuff to know about this film for this video is the aspects RE7 hoped to replicate as the main inspiration. The first was how the movie was focused on one location, the cabin, grounding the film in its setting rather than jumping from place to place, allowing for a more intimate feeling with the horror, creating a sense of isolation trapped in a particular location. The second is the small cast of characters. Rather than having large ensembles that bounce off each other, the amount of active characters in the story can be counted on a pair of hands. And the final point, not outright stated in the GDC talk, but I noticed a connection between the two, is the Baker family and the Deadites. In Evil Dead, Deadites are a type of horror that act as fun antagonists, but are something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. What makes Deadites horrifying is how they can possess a body, living or dead, transforming whoever is afflicted to look more ghoulish and demonic, which by itself is terrible. But what makes it so much worse is it's not just physical damage they can do, but also emotional. They will giggle in glee as they harm you. They will relish the psychological torture they put you through, wailing and mocking you as they hold the person you love captive, swapping between their demonic form and the person trapped in hopes that you'll let your guard down before they kill you. And except for elements outside the film's bounds, there is no cure to save someone possessed. The only thing to do is stab the entity with the Kandarian dagger, immobilizing the Deadite or hacking them to pieces. It's not just the physical change that's scary, it's the knowledge that something has taken over the person you know, and there's no way of getting them back. But that creature will use that in every way possible they can think of to destroy you. And it's that point that really makes you root for Ash. He starts as a regular, timid guy who just wants to spend time with his partner and friends, but is thrust into the role of hero in the name of self-preservation when everybody else is possessed. This hits home when a Deadite possesses his girlfriend, and rather than physically attacking Ash, it just laughs with a wide grin at how much suffering it's inflicting on Ash just by being there. This is comparable to Mia being possessed and the cruelty Ethan suffers from. Even the Bakers are afflicted with this in ways I'll expand on when their respective times come. So with that knowledge stated, let's get back to the story. Looking around the dining room, there's a door on the opposite side of the fridge. In that room, a hatch can be opened with a key. So while we're looking for the key, we walk into a hallway and come across the horror of this section, Jack Baker. As previously stated, Jack is the strongest of the Baker family and the best to start the game with. Rather than being saved for later, Jack chooses to hunt you down and murder you with his own two hands and a weapon. It's worked well so far with the others, why should that change with you? This leads to a chase between you and Jack, having to distance yourself from him while grabbing the key across the hall. But the family patriarch has some surprises in store, one of which triggers if Jack is positioned in the dining room area while booking it through the hall, to where Jack will break a hole through that wall, creating a way to traverse the section both of you can use. Jack feels otherworldly, he is the predator and you are the prey, but takes a sadistic glee in this dynamic. If he attacks you in the room with the hatch, he will cut off your leg with his shovel and taunt you by handing you a first aid tonic to heal, only if you crawl across the room for it. The power dynamic between you is so large, and the best you can hope for is escape. So by some miracle, you elude Jack long enough and make your way into the hatch. And traveling below the house leads to Ethan coming across the first save room in the game, featuring for the first time the item storage box, which can be used to store and remove items from our inventory. Before leaving, the landline begins to ring. Uncertain, Ethan picks up the receiver. The voice is the woman Ethan had chatted with during the Mia situation. She suggests we escape the house ASAP and take care of that high-tech watch on her left arm called a codex. We don't know much about this woman, but she's willing to lend us a metaphorical hand. We have just enough of the physical ones for now. After we investigate the house, we come across a light from one of the windows. It looks like that guess of a cop was correct after all. Ethan talks to the deputy, but with what he's seen so far, he's not able to articulate himself in the best way, and because of it, leads to the officer to believe in his words, "You don't exactly seem like you're playing with a full deck yourself, alright?" Ethan is panicked at this, but the officer calmly restates there's been reports of several missing persons, which he's looking into. A stranger on the premises is very suspicious. Ethan agrees to be questioned, and the two will meet in the garage, but Ethan, terrified for his life, asks for a weapon from the law enforcement agent. The officer is bewildered at this request, but when he hears the sincere fear in Ethan's voice, convinced his life is at stake, he hands our character a pocket knife. Now, it's a small moment, but I really like this scene. In this dire situation, there's a flicker of hope when the flashlight cuts through the darkened hallway, And the fact the deputy is well aware of how crazy this seems, but still gives Ethan something to defend himself from the short trek from the hall to the garage is really humanizing, conveying that this is someone who really cares about people. That's awesome. But we're only about 50 minutes into this game, so this moment of hope isn't gonna last. Thanks to the deputy's pocket knife, we can cut through the impossible tape that we totally couldn't have used our fingers for and open the garage. Ethan, panicked, says they should leave while the deputy wants some answers. And right when we're getting somewhere, the garage begins to close. And this happens.
Hey, put that door back! Put that door back up! Wait!
Jack is back, and it's time to fight. There's no escaping this encounter, but there is a car and the keys nearby. In a very satisfying move, if you can get into the car with the keys before Jack throws you out, congratulations! Ethan now has legal authority for vehicular manslaughter against Mr. Baker. When you run over Jack, it's amazing, because minutes ago you were helpless against this guy. Now the turntables have turned, and it's great. Until you begin to notice Jack isn't there anymore. And why is the car shaking?
Ah, shit! Nice car, Ethan! Fuck! Let's finish this, you and I. Oh yeah, I'm gonna take you for a ride. No, 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 no!
After the close call and getting out of the car, the vehicle's wreckage punctuates the—
Oh boy! Now look what you've done, motherfucker! Ah!
With that explosion, we make our way to the ladder and—
Do I have your attention, boy? You're about to see something wonderful. Oh, fuck!
After a series of "I'm really dead this time, psych, just a prank," I think it's appropriate to cap off this portion and move on to the next section. Upon entering the main hall, a stunning location that shows the photorealistic art style in all of its glory, we get another call from the woman asking if Daddy gave us a hard time, revealing she is related to the Bakers, but isn't affected like the others, giving us the objective to find some keys and get out of the main house. This section is focused on exploring the nooks and crannies of the house, as well as gathering other supplies, and it's some nice downtime compared to all the crazy action we've come across so far. There are also puzzles scattered around that are pretty cool. My favorite is the shotgun. You first look at it and go, "Oh sick, a shotgun," so you walk over and grab it, only for the statue holding it to activate the door and locking you inside. The only way to open it again is to put the gun back in its hands. This acts as a joke on the player, like, haha, nice try, bucko, think again. But it also has a cool solution where if you find a broken shotgun, you can swap the two, getting rid of the broken one while keeping the gun you actually want. So while we explore, we find this wooden block that can be used for another puzzle. And this one looks way more like the outline than my previous guesses. With that, we take the block and—
Heck of a thing, ain't it? Sure shit beats the hell out of dying.
Okay, Jack, much like the virus that made its way into your immune system, you have burrowed your way into this video. Let's talk about Jack Baker. The most iconic villain in Resident Evil 7 is the father of the Baker family, Jack. When the team was working on the game, they made each family member focus on a particular subgenre of horror, and Jack's is focused on slasher horror. A dangerous figure or entity using their physical capabilities to kill groups of people. These villains are seemingly impossible to deal with. Out of all of the subgenres of horror featured in this game, this is the most direct and I would argue the most raw. Because while it's focused on a simple concept, find and kill its prey, it's that simplicity that makes it impactful. No other build-up is needed, and I say this next point to highlight this and not to make you paranoid. It's the most realistic thing that could happen in real life.
A bigger and stronger opponent chasing you down is terrifying to even imagine, and it's that universal panic of fight or flight that makes Jack such a great antagonist. Jack is a juggernaut in the body of a middle-aged man. He will keep coming back again and again and again and again, hunting you around the house until there's nothing left to hunt, all the while talking to you in this jovial, if occasionally crass manner. Slasher horror isn't dependent on the killer's personality to be impactful. It's usually what they are capable of that makes them scary. But Resident Evil 7 goes the extra mile and gives Jack an interesting one that makes him even scarier.
Oi, it's me, not Ethan Winters here. We're doing this YouTuber vlogger style just because I don't want to set up my camera and I kind of want to test this out. But on a serious note, in the section I was just about to build up to, I forgot to mention that this is going to have a trigger warning because with Jack Baker, we're talking about slasher horror, but also linking that to parental abuse. So in the section, I try to talk about it a bit more, but I'm going to issue a trigger warning here and you can skip to this time code. Yeah, I'll put some text here, it'll look really good and stuff. But this time code, you can skip to that and then we'll just kind of carry on with the video if you don't want to see it. Whether it's something that has affected you or if it's just a subject that is something you don't want to get into, I totally get it. You can feel free to jump ahead. But if not, alright, welcome. Hope you are enjoying this crazy ride. I wasn't kidding about the candy pumpkins that I mentioned earlier.
And I could be digging too deep into this, but after watching a lot of fascinating and intelligent people talk about horror media on YouTube, it seems like horror media can be a vehicle to address and explore the fears of people or society. And Jack really embodies the horror of an abusive parent. Parents should be nurturing and loving to their children, teaching them about the world, instilling lessons to make their lives easier and happier, giving them safety and a level of respect and independence for their children to discover who they are and the people they want to be. Of course, it's more complicated in real life. Everyone has flaws and no one is perfect, but it's that core idea good parents strive for. But it becomes scary when one or both parents want nothing to do with their children, or even worse, they take active disdain for them, choosing to inflict the cruelties they have suffered onto their children, from neglect to emotional abuse to much worse I don't have the constitution to get into. I have a great relationship with my parents, but in the past there were times where I questioned my own safety at home, where a locked door felt like a bastion from the uncertainty downstairs, or if I just kept my mouth shut and didn't make a big deal about something, a problem wouldn't escalate where I felt like my life would be in danger. And Jack captures that feel I had when I was younger, his jovial nature contrasted with his physical actions, and the fact he considers you part of the family really nails this home. The first time I played it, I couldn't pinpoint why it was so captivating to me. At first it was, oh man, this guy is fun to watch, he's having a blast. When I picked it up years later to record footage, that parallel really sunk in for me. A father should be strong for his family, not strong against them, and the physical harm he threatens and acts on his family at the dinner scene shows this remnant is failing as a parent. And that is what makes it so gratifying when, after so much time dealing with Jack, an encounter culminates in a battle with chainsaws in a slaughterhouse. It sounds absurd, but when playing it, it's so fitting. You and Jack have been having this balance of power shifting between the two of you. It feels perfect to have an even playing field to settle in, and fortunately, you come out on top, leading to this satisfying moment.
Do me a favor and stay dead.
After this battle, this is where things start to change. This is where those horrors of the Baker family aren't these impossible entities. They feel beatable. Remember, Jack was the strongest of the Bakers. He was the top dog, if you will, that Marguerite and Lucas were obedient to. And using the complicated equation, if Jack was a greater threat than the other Bakers, then by beating him, Ethan, or I suppose you, are now a bigger threat than Marguerite and Lucas. You are now the top dog. This is where the turning point of the survival horror power fantasy kicks in. You are no longer struggling to do the bare minimum. You have proved that they can bleed and that they are beatable, and it's only a matter of time before you make that happen. Also, going off the idea of this type of horror, I think it's really beautiful that the slasher horror representing an abusive parent is the one you beat first, showing that you are stronger than the cruelties they inflict upon you. Now that Jack has been dealt with, you can explore the house at your leisure, find the keys, and escape the main house into the trailer. Investigating this trailer, it's safe to assume it was the woman Zoe's, and speaking of which, look who's calling. Zoe informs us she, her family, and Mia are contaminated, and the only way Ethan, Mia, and Zoe are able to escape is if they can get a hold of a serum to remove the virus. Unfortunately, she doesn't know where it is, but she suggests that her mother might know something in the old house. And with that, it's time to gather our courage once again and enter the domain of Margarette Baker. While you've entered the point where you are becoming more than just the underdog, remember not to let that overconfidence get the better of you. Because similar to what happened to Jack, if given a chance, your opponent can come out on top if backed into a corner. That's the feeling you get from Margarette. The old house section is the one I find to be the creepiest. While the main house had a regal beauty, this one is way more decrepit. The floor is shoddy, the walls are disgusting, and the areas of the house have these hives with this jello-like consistency. Exploring the old building, we find our wife Mia, but before you get much info out of her, the son of the Bakers, Lucas, grabs her and they leave to a different section of the house, leaving us alone with Margarette Baker. Living up to her more paranoid and twitchy nature, Margarette prefers to let her swarms of insects attack you instead, staying in the back and watching you struggle. These things are brutal because they swarm you. It's challenging to get a clear shot, only hitting a few with every bullet you fire. The aftermath of their encounters are evident looking at your arms, with bumps scattered all around. But what's remarkable is how the tone is different. It's a bit spooky at first with the bugs and darkness, feeling like a similar position with Jack. But soon after you enter the building, you come across blueprints for a flamethrower, and if you take your time to explore, you can find the parts, rewarding your time with a brand new weapon that is perfect against the swarms. What's cool is if you encounter Margarette while exploring the house and deal a certain damage threshold, she'll push you over and run away, covered in the darkness, leaving you to explore to your heart's content. Margarette doesn't feel like a powerful, intimidating figure like her husband, but rather a terrified person who, if backed in a corner, will go berserk in hopes of survival. And now it feels appropriate to talk about the type of horror this Baker exemplifies. Margarette is highlighting the horror subgenre of body horror. This type of nightmare feel is focused on displaying the physical violations of the body, and if there is one thing that makes me actively squirm, it's this type. Because a killer is scary, for sure, but at least there's a chance, even if it's minor, that you can survive as long as you stay out of sight. But with body horror, you can't escape from that. It is a part of and will stick with you. It's so effective because even if the concept or injury is absurd, using something so tangible as the human body adds a layer of believability, peeling back how delicate or durable our physical bodies are. Margarette is a relatively regular looking person at first, but in her boss fight, she takes a monstrous form. Her limbs are elongated, she makes these horrid groans, and she crawls around like a spider. But there's another point that adds to this encounter. The human body is a surreal thing, and I don't think I'll ever fully comprehend it in my lifetime. Body horror plays into the idea of taking our very flesh and contorting it in such a way that it seems unrecognizable, and the design team really went the extra mile involving that with this character. Margarette is a mother and has given birth 2 times, and childbirth is a process that can bring enormous amounts of joy to a family or an overwhelming sense of tragedy. I will never truly understand what a woman has to go through during the process of pregnancy. The emotional and physical changes that occur for months, warping their self-image and their actions affecting someone growing inside of them. But I imagine it's like an emotional roller coaster with ups and downs. I bring this up because I'm going to ask you a question that will have an implication I know you'll pick up on, and I want to apologize in advance for the mental image. That question being, where are the bugs coming from? Throughout the old house, there are hives and a layer of bugs on doors, keeping you from getting in. And you might be wondering where they're coming from. Is it the house's foundation with mutated termites? And you find out when during the Margarette boss fight, when you see the large hive located lower on her body, and sometimes she'll disappear into the shadows, and you'll hear this noise. The use of body horror in this section is spooky, it's grotesque, and it's excellent, and it highlights how great Marguerite is as an antagonist. Physically, she looks scary, but her mobility to crawl all around the fighting arena, using the darkness to her advantage, is wonderfully disturbing. But she's trying to disorient you for a reason, and with persistence, we eventually defeat Marguerite and can take a breather. Using a key item left over from Marguerite, we explore a locked section of the house, showing us what looks like child drawings. And traveling deeper, a voice tells us to stay away. But at the end, we find a piece to create the serum. As soon as we get on the phone, we talk to Zoe confirming the piece and making our way to the trailer. There's a problem.
Now where the hell are you? You know, never mind. We only need the head and you've got it. And this is gonna help me and me, right?
Hey, buddy!
The Lucas section of the game is incredible and one of my favorite parts, and a lot of that comes down to the subgenre of horror Lucas embodies, that being psychological horror. In a horrifying experience such as this, it's important to have a strong mental fortitude to help you get through this. And psychological horror is the type whose goal is to take a metaphorical sledgehammer and break those mental and emotional defenses. Physical cruelty can still be afflicted, but the main goal is to mentally disturb the person, leaving them a husk of their former selves if they're lucky enough to escape. For the viewer, while you are nowhere near affected as the character in the piece of media you're experiencing, because of this focus on disturbing the audience, it can stick with you for a long time. Lucas is such a perfect antagonist that embodies this. Physically, Ethan or you could absolutely destroy him if stuck in a room together, and Lucas knows that. So he always keeps his distance from you, choosing to let the mold monsters fight on his behalf, deciding to mentally wear you down until he can strike by putting you in difficult situations and taunting you until you lose it. Lucas has captured Zoe and the second serum ingredient. The only way to find her is by making our way to his party. But to do that, we need to obtain 2 keycards by exploring the rest of the main house. The mold creatures are all around the house, so you'll have to dodge, block, and shoot accordingly. And you'll make a surprise visit to what remains of the deputy, in a grotesque but necessary way to progress. Sorry, man. When we visit Lucas's old room, we come to a discovery. Lucas is a monster, even before the virus got to him. This is apparent when reading a diary entry of a young Lucas trapping a child in his attic, by welding the button to an object so no one would ever find it. Holy shit, dude, that's messed up. You can also find a videotape labeled Happy Birthday, and to go over it, we need to talk about Clancey. Okay, so you're probably wondering, who the hell is Clancey? Well, remember ages upon ages ago in the basic premise of this video, I mentioned some guys filming for their web series. Well, the cameraman and the player character in that section is Clancey. And poor Clancey. This dude has gone through the worst of it. Ethan's got it rough, but if you know about the DLC for the game labeled the banned footage, it is not nearly as bad as Clancey. After being captured by the Bakers, this guy's had to go through horrors beyond belief, from surviving hordes of mold creatures and fighting Jack, to trapped by Marguerite, leading to a playable version of Misery, to a Saw torture game where Clancey and an opponent play blackjack, but the one who loses a hand will also lose a finger. And after going through all these ordeals, Clancey still clings on to the hope of making it out of this nightmare. And that's when he's in Happy Birthday. The section acts as an escape room, aiming to light the candles on the birthday cake. The only problem is each time you pass through the room, a pressure plate activates and puts out the flame. This leads to you doing a sort of trial and horror, experimenting with items and solutions, and occasionally getting hurt. And this culminates when, after grabbing a handle for a wind-up clown, this happens.
What the fuck is this? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, man. No! No!
This moment serves 2 details. 1, it's the room's password nearby, and 2, this is the moment that seals Clancey's fate, or to be exact, this moment. Because you'll notice liquid pouring onto the floor, and when you finally get the birthday candles lit, you find out what that liquid was. As Clancey attempts to put out the flames, the handle comes off, and by suffocating on the fumes and burning alive, Clancey is killed. We never get to find out more about Clancey, but you still feel bad for the poor guy. But what's interesting is even if they never met while alive, Clancey actually saves Ethan. Because by watching the tape, Ethan now knows how the puzzle room works. So in the culmination of this section, when Ethan is put in the same situation as Clancey was, as Lucas watches with glee, you can bypass most of the puzzle, avoiding the dart to the abdomen, bypassing the oil on the floor, and ignoring that stupid clown, leading to a very satisfying moment I will play unedited for your enjoyment.
Motherfucker! You're supposed to die! That was supposed to be for you, goddammit!
Defeated and humiliated, Lucas does what he does best. He runs away when his actions have repercussions, leading us with the missing ingredient and the location of Zoe and Mia. When we meet up with the two, Zoe quickly combines the ingredients and makes the serum, but just before we're about to use them, the remaining bit of Jack, now turned into a giant mold monster, attacks us. And at this point, your character has dealt with Jack multiple times, and it's more of an annoyance than a terrifying encounter. Ethan himself will say that in the fight.
This is getting old, Jack.
And after hitting all of the glowing eyes, Jack topples over in defeat. And just as we're about to leave, in classic Jack fashion, pulling another, haha, just a prank, I'm actually feeling pretty great. Ethan is frankly over this bit, and with advice from Zoe, injects Jack with the serum, defeating him. For good this time, pinky promise, no backsies, for realsies, cross his heart and hope he dies, you shot Jack in the eyes. But that moment of victory leads to a problem, because we had to use one of the serums on Jack. This means there's only one left to cure either Mia or Zoe. One of them will be unable to escape, and it's Ethan's decision on who it is. There's Zoe, someone who has been instrumental in making it to this point, being the one to staple your arm and hand together, giving you advice and tips on how to escape and rescue Mia, being a key member to make this possible. Or your wife. Tough call. For real though, this is a hard decision, in part because you feel the repercussions for what you choose, having to look that person in the eye and rationalize to yourself why you picked that. In this playthrough, I picked Mia, and it made me feel like garbage by denying Zoe the chance to escape. Zoe has been helping you for most of the game, and it feels pretty shitty to turn your back on this person who made this escape possible. Ethan says we'll send help, but it feels more like a justification for not picking her, and it's a bummer. From here, we make our way on the boat, saying goodbye to the Bakers as we cruise down the Louisiana swamp. As we travel, Ethan presses Mia for answers for her involvement in this place. Mia states she genuinely has no memory of anything around this, before coming across a huge destroyed ship. Just then, our boat enters a health code violation as we are submerged in water. We are now at the tail end of the game, and this is where the plot shakes up. When back in control, rather than playing as Ethan Winters, we are instead playing Mia, quickly discovering Ethan is captured by the mold, and it's our job to rescue him. To do this, we explore the ruined ship while seeing hallucinations of this little girl, asking Mia if she remembers yet, which culminates in this girl, named Evelyn by the way, demanding us to watch a video so that we can be a family again. And what follows is a memory sequence that shares a couple of things with us. The first and most shocking, Mia is more interesting than she lets on. When starting the game, we, or at least I, assumed that Mia would be a regular civilian much like Ethan, and would be positioned as a damsel trapped with our job to save her. But the game flips that on its head, revealing that Mia is actually an agent, transferring the experimental bioweapon Evelyn on the ship. She handles firearms like a pro, utilizes remote bombs, handles this rad corrosive liquid stuff to destroy locks on doors, and most importantly, keeps her cool when fighting the mold creatures with an experience of a veteran. And the second is that Evelyn has a soft spot for Mia, seeing the agent as her mother. In this sequence, besides seeing the moment Mia sends the video to Ethan that is the catalyst for this game, Evelyn caused the ship to be destroyed, having herself and Mia as the only survivors, leading to the Baker family helping the two and being infected. After watching the tape, Mia's goal is once again to find Ethan in the ship's lower levels, and I just want to say this is my least favorite part of the game. I think the Mia revelation is really cool, and I like how it took the time to show the events leading up to the game. But there are two main points that irk me about this section. The first is how playstyle-wise, this tape is mandatory. The 3 other tapes in the game are optional, and usually on a first playthrough, it makes sense to watch them. This particular one is something you have to do, with the little rascal bioweapon forcing you to watch it. Rather than filling me with dread at a powerful villain making demands, it just makes me think, I'm twice your size, how realistically far can I throw you? And the second is the boat itself. While I think the idea of exploring the remnants of a ship with bioweapons scattered around is a cool idea, it just feels so out of place here. Like, the Baker estate is a video game level, for sure, but it also felt mostly believable. Like, I can totally buy Lucas converting the barn into his lair, with traps and enemies scattered there. It's rumored to be abandoned and rarely anyone stops by. Yet there's this nearly destroyed cruise line looking ship in a river, and no one has attempted to report it in 3 years? It's hard for me to believe, but if this is just a cool idea the team wanted to do, then fair enough. I'll just simmer down on this one. Though I will say, the ship isn't as fun to explore as the previous areas, because navigating through it is difficult as most rooms look identical. Alright, that's all I got for the boat section. Eventually we make our way to Ethan and are back in his perspective. But just before we resume our protagonist, we get a hallucination where we see Jack Baker, but this time not as the monster we've been fighting, but as the man he's been for most of his life. He apologizes for all he's done and says that this family wouldn't have hurt him if they had a choice. Evelyn had corrupted their minds and made them into monsters, and pleads with Ethan to defeat her. It shows Jack's significant level of empathy, because even though he knows Evelyn is a monster, he shares with Ethan that all she wanted was to feel loved. And the fact he can have that level of empathy for someone who has brought ruin to himself and his family shows the saintly compassion he has, but also the tragedy of what Evelyn had shaped him into. And an additional tragedy is that he's unaware of the monster Lucas was before Evelyn arrived. I don't think this was a mistake from the writer saying that no one in his family was a killer before this, but rather the character himself not knowing. Before Evelyn infects Mia again, she gives us a sample of Evelyn's genetic material and locks the door behind her, saving us from her and leading us to a mad dash to the finish. At this point in the game, you have fought all of the Bakers, you discovered how this happened, and you know what to do. Make a toxin and defeat Evelyn. Before making our way, we come across a safe zone to gear up. The radio picks up a conversation from what is assumed to be the military. One of the members is making his way to the mine, the same location we're going, and what follows is a mad dash through the mines, gunning down the mold creatures and sprinting as fast as our legs can carry us. We travel deeper into the mine and find a case. Combining it with the samples creates a toxin. Now, all we have to do is find Evelyn. So we go deeper, leading us back to a familiar spot. Turns out Mia was right on the money with a shortcut in the basement of the house. And making our way there, after dealing with some hallucinations, revealing Evelyn was the one controlling Mia, that childlike glee Mia had when harming you, comparable to the Evil Dead's Deadites, was because it was literally done by a child. That's pretty messed up, man, holy cow. But after injecting the toxin in Evelyn, the hallucination falls, and we discovered that Evelyn was grandma the whole time. Ever since she made her escape, her body has been aging rapidly, turning into an old woman, just watching in the background while everything happens. Finally, at long last, we get into a battle with Evelyn. A moment that isn't too mechanically demanding but feels cool. Evelyn has taken over bits of the room, requiring you to deal as much damage as possible before she eats you. But everything has been building to this moment. It's time to finally show this monster who's boss. This fight is so sick that the house begins to break apart. Ethan is thrown around by her and it's looking rough. But a voice chimes in on the codex saying use it, as Ethan sees his savior, the Albert 01 handgun. The entire game has been building to this moment of catharsis. You are looking this threat dead in the eyes, with no disguises, no henchmen, no mystery left to solve, just you and her. Ethan even cracks a one-liner for the occasion.
Playtime's over.
As the group arrives from the helicopter, we catch the attention of one of the soldiers. I'm gonna be quiet and let you enjoy this ending. We'll talk later.
I'm Redfield. I'm glad we found you.
The fuck took you guys so long?
Ethan?
Mia, you made it. I'm glad.
Did I?
They say that when one door closes, another opens. Well, a door closed tonight. And what a long night it was. But not just for me. Mia and I weren't the only victims here. So were the Bakers. It was that thing, Evelyn, who made them that way. But now Evelyn's dead. And these guys are here to clean up the mess. I had just come to terms with losing Mia. But now she's back and wants to start over. Put all this behind us. Maybe this is where the next door opens.
And that is the story of Resident Evil 7. It's quite the trip, but thanks for joining me on it. The last thing I want to cover before wrapping up this video is a remarkable aspect of the game, and that is its replayability. There are unlockables for the game that are fun incentives to play it again, like having a replica of the Albert 01 when you start the game, and Madhouse mode, the hardest difficulty in the game, making enemies hit way harder and changing the location of key items and powerful weapons. Plus, if you know what you're doing, playthroughs can be pretty quick. In fact, if you complete the game in under 4 hours, you'll be rewarded with the circular saw weapon on any future playthroughs. Not to mention the other DLC like the aforementioned banned footage, or the free add-on Not a Hero, where you play as Chris Redfield, attempting to capture Lucas Baker. Resident Evil 7 is a total blast, and I'm so proud to have it be my introduction to survival horror video games. If you decide to check it out, I hope you have a horrifying but overall enjoyable time celebrating Halloween, or whenever you try it out. And thank you so much for checking out this video. If you have stuck around for the entirety of it, or accidentally left it on and fell asleep in bed, thank you so much for checking this out. At this current time of recording, this is the longest video I've ever made, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it and want to see more, I'll link a playlist of some video game recommendations if you're interested, and here's one you might be into. And I'd be honored if you subscribe to stay up to date with any future macho recommendations. Thanks again, and have a good one. Later.